Alexis, welcome to the M Word podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on, Jennifer.
I'm looking forward to this conversation, Alexis, because I think many of us who work as small business owners or just busy people in general, like the idea that we can hack and be happier and do more with less or whatever we call these productivity hacks and life fixes is always a good day for me. So I look forward to learning from you. But before we get into sort of tips and tricks, I would love for you just to tell us, what do you do and a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I am a time management, productivity, and stress reduction coach, the longest title in the world, but I mean I do all of those things. So it is helpful for people to know that. I have been doing this in private practice for about 7 years now. And before that, I spent the first like 15 years or so of my career working in early stage startups. Um, in tech, in professional services. I even had a little stint into pro sports in there, but essentially I was doing everything that wasn't sales and engineering. So all of the things: legal, finance, HR, payroll, facilities, like just all of the catch-all things.
Hmm.
That's kind of what my job always was. It was like, oh, there's nobody to do this, Alexis will do it. And so I was always working in environments where there was just way too much to do than people to do it, and people running really fast, literally and figuratively, and people burning out left and right around me. And I didn't want that. Like, I wanted to be successful, but I did not want to do it at the expense of my personal life, which is really important to me as well. And so eventually, people started coming to me for productivity related things, for how to better manage their time, keep track of things, etc. I had a boss who was like, hey, could you do a workshop for our whole company about this stuff? And I thought that sounds like the most fun thing ever. And that kind of sparked something in me. And then many years after I started doing this work, I learned that I had ADHD, and I realized, oh, now it all makes sense in retrospect. Kind of we do the work we need.
So there's so much in that story. Did you like hit your own wall? Did you burn out? Is that when you realized that like I can't be that person who's in wearing 10 hats in a company?
So I didn't actually burn out. And I attribute this to my parents who were always of the mind of like, do the best job that you can, but don't overextend. Because if you overextend, I remember my mom always said, never work more than 40 hours a week because then they will expect it. And so I actually didn't burn out. But it was because I started putting a lot of systems in place and I started setting boundaries really, really early. And so I kind of, got right up to the edge and then realized that I can do something about this. I don't have to get there. And I started seeing that happening for other people around me as like cautionary tales to be like, nope, even though it's uncomfortable to set a boundary, I'm doing it because I don't want that.
Yeah, and I wonder, I feel like it's in modern parlance that we hear about boundaries or burnout at work or
Mhm.
sort of our own expectation setting on work-life balance or this idea that to get ahead, you have to be the 80-hour worker. I feel like our parents' generation, like that was like hooey. No one would talk about this kind of stuff. Like you worked hard, you did what the company said and expected you to, or you were not considered a valuable employee. Like, do you sense that it's changing, or is it
Oh,
more the social world that we live in? It just feels like it's changing.
I think it's definitely changed. I think there's a lot of things that have happened. So it's definitely changing or has changed. I think that there's a huge piece that we kind of neglect to think about from our parents' generation, perhaps, which is that like they didn't have computers or cell phones. I mean, maybe they had computers towards the ends of, depending on how old people are. Maybe they had computers towards the end of their career, but they didn't have laptops that they were bringing home, and they certainly didn't have smartphones. And so there were built-in boundaries, right? You could sure stay late at work, and sometimes they did, but for the most part, you weren't bringing it home with you. And I think that's a really big difference. Like most people that I work with, they don't answer email in bed because they want to, right? They
Right,
answer email
right.
in bed because it feels like they have to. It feels like there's no other choice. And then it's this kind of vicious cycle where everybody's working around the clock, and And also maybe they're not working around the clock. It's just that we're working with people in different time zones and people like there's just so much stuff happening and so much technological ability to do the stuff that it starts to feel really all encompassing.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, and you see, I have in my notes, you had said to me when we talked about a month ago that these types of self-awareness and boundary setting, like you're not taught this in school, right? You said that to me. And in fact, listening to you speak just now, it's like it's almost the opposite because to your point about laptops and technology, those are now in use even in primary school and secondary school, right? And so kids are sort of always on like they're almost being ingrained in that idea that it's like you should always be studying or you should always be doing the next thing because you have access to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is honestly my beef with homework in general. It's like
Hmm.
I want to train my kids to do work after hours.
Right.
You know? Like, I mean, I'm not saying all homework is bad, but it's like I think there's a lot of it that is just kind of busy work that's not actually helping. And
Hmm.
and really what we're doing is saying, no, you've had a full day, now go do more.
Hmm.
I don't think that's very healthy.
Right. So am I right in remembering you told me you were you when you went in school, you studied existentialism and
Yes.
art.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what that means. What is,
Yeah. So
can you put it
existentialism.
in dumb lady marketing terms?
Yes, of course. Well, I'll put it in, yeah. So existentialism is essentially the theory that we make our own meaning, right? That there's no preordained meaning in life and we get to make whatever meaning it is to us. So a lot of people find existentialism to be very just not very hopeful. And I find it to be the exact opposite. A lot of people think like, oh, there's, it's just based on what we see and what is here. And I'm like, no, 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 we get to choose. And this is not a thing that I bring, it's interesting we're talking
Hmm.
about it. It's not like a part of my business or anything like that. But I think that on some level I was just interested in that stuff. And so I was like, oh, let me just dive down this
Hmm.
rabbit hole. And also, let me do studio art at the same time and education theory at the same time because I was just interested in those subjects.
Hmm.
Maybe
But
my,
isn't that, I think, hearing you explain that though, isn't that exactly what your
yeah,
business is?
I
You
think it
get
is.
to choose.
I
You
think
get
you
to
are
set your
right.
own your boundary. Like, so I mean, I want to get into a little bit more about like kind of what are you seeing when you're working with clients and
Yeah.
like what does it look like in practice
Mhm.
to you know it, think about productivity. I think about the book Get Stuff Done.
Getting things
Am I
done. Yeah.
remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, Get Things Done.
Yeah.
And it's like it's that more, better, faster, like this idea of like all I need is I'm the type I just need one more pretty bin or I need one more really pretty notebook and it's all gonna fix everything, right?
Everything will be resolved.
Everything will be resolved. But I think part of what you're basing this idea is like you're I mean, what gives you hope is that it's within your control to decide what stays on your plate and what maybe you let go of.
Yeah.
Am I reading too much into that?
No, no, I think you're totally right. I think that like a lot of us are operating from this perspective that like everything that comes to us is required of us,
Hmm.
right? Instead of us being able to say like, no, I am at capacity. I will arrive at capacity at some point. And I'll give you like an example of how this shows up. So I was working with one of my clients. It was like mid-pandemic. Her company was growing so fast because it was a technology that was really helpful during the pandemic, like it was just going crazy. And she was on a little team of two people and they had a lot of responsibility. And all of a sudden, they went from working like a pretty normal work week with reasonable workload to she was working until like 11 p.m. every night, right? And working from home. And it was just like never ending. And she was just kind of absorbing the work that came to her. She was like, "Well, I have to do it. It's coming my way. I have to do it." And eventually, I was I was encouraging her to maybe have a conversation with her manager about expectations, about the workload, et cetera. And she was really nervous to do so because she didn't want to look like a bad employee, right? Like she wanted to be able to handle everything that was coming her way. But it finally got to a breaking point. She was burning out. She had to have the conversation. There was no other option. And she did. And she came back to me and she said, I was so surprised by what my manager said. Because her manager said, thank you for telling me this. If you just keep absorbing the work, I don't know it's a problem, right? If you just keep absorbing the work, I just assume you can do the work. Now that you've told me you can't, now that I know how you're working and how long you're working, now I have the ammo to go to senior leadership and ask for headcount. And I think that to me just remains this really instructive story, right? Because it's like, yeah, we're doing the things that, like, we have notifications on our phone where emails are coming all the time. And we don't stop to think to say, like, is that necessary or even realistic for me to do those things? Just because we can, we do. And so, yeah, I think a lot about how do we advocate for ourselves internally and externally, because we will all reach that breaking point. Even the most efficient human being on the planet, even David Allen of getting things done, he is going to reach a point at which he doesn't have um, capacity. And I will say, like, I do actually like David Allen, and I like a lot of the stuff that he says. I think a lot of it is really constructive.
I liked the book too. I'm There's not a ding on
Yeah,
that, but it's we think about productivity as being how can I do more?
like more, better, faster. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think about, so my definition, my personal definition of productivity is doing what I intended to do. And so,
Oh, please repeat that.
yeah, it's doing what I intended to do. So if I have a work day and I intend to have, a few different meetings and I intend to get something done and I do that, that feels productive. If what I intend to do is go into the hammock in my backyard and open a beer and read a book, that is also productive because it's what my intention is, right? And I can't do it like you, me, everyone else. We cannot do all the things. Like there is no way to get everything done. And instead of feeling hopeless about that, I think that gives me a real sense of like, no, I have agency and control of all the things I could be doing. I get to decide which ones of them to do. Like that's
I
on me.
think that's a really powerful reframing for especially for perhaps us type A's who kind of measure success by volume or
Yeah.
you know what I mean,
Yeah.
speed and all of those things, the more, better, faster. Um, you are probably going to know more about this. I'm going to say this sideways and wrong, but I am recalling a podcast I listened to eons ago. It was maybe one that was like on like Science Friday or one of those like sort of nerdy sciencey ones. But it talked about this concept called the planning fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was they had a like a researcher for some big university on talking about it's like the idea, and we've all done it, where it's like, oh, I'm just going to do that tonight, and you stick the same notebook in your bag when you leave work every night, like you're just in the moment, like you think somehow magically that your desire, inspiration, time is going to carve out that you, and then you get to work the next day and you take it out of your bag, it hasn't left your bag, right? And
Yeah.
how it's so common that we and it's in our brain. It's not I made
Mhm.
a mistake. It's a way humans think about how much time things actually take us to do, and so we almost built in, we fail because we assume we can do so much more than we can do.
Right. Yeah, we are all, I'm always telling my clients we need to be ruthlessly realistic, right? And that means we might need to be chopping what we intend to do in half in order to fit it into the time that we have. And to
Hmm.
your point, I say it a lot, like your 8 a.m. self is a very different person than your 8 p.m. self. So what you think you're gonna, we have all the hope in the world. We didn't get to that stuff, but we're gonna bring it home. And then we get dinner on the table, we eat dinner, we put our kids to bed. And the last thing that we want to do is break out the work and start again. And so the way that I often think about that or try to reframe that or help my clients with that is to think about prioritizing your future self. So will tonight me really, really be wanting to do that? Like, is tonight me
Hmm.
really going to do that thing? Right. Will tomorrow me wish that I had just done that thing during my workday? Like if we can kind of extend that planning horizon a little bit so that we can think about what will future me wish would have happened, it can sometimes be a little easier to not fall into this trap of constantly like I have a lot of clients who are like, I I just bring home all this stuff to do on the weekend and then I don't do any of the stuff, but I worry about not doing this stuff. And then I don't even enjoy my weekend because I'm just worrying about all the stuff that I brought home to do that I'm not willing to do. And so sometimes I say something
And
like,
then on Monday, you feel like shit that you didn't do
yeah,
all the things you told
yes.
yourself you were going to do. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
exactly. It's like this cycle that is just, that just makes us feel bad, right? And I often talk about what I call task realism, which is the idea that, like, okay, let's simplify it. Let's say that you have time to do 5 things tomorrow, right? Is it going to be better for you to really take a hard look at what's on your plate and figure out the 5 things that you can get done realistically in that time that you have available and do those things? Or is it going to be better for you to have 25 things on your list and get 5 of them done? Like, even if you get the same 5 things done, in the first scenario, you feel great. And in the second scenario, you feel like shit. You're like, how come I didn't do these other 20 things? But the same things got done, right? And so this kind of like being more realistic with ourselves instead of this unbridled optimism, I think actually helps us to be more fulfilled.
Now, how do you get there though? Is that an aha moment or is that something you have to train and practice in like any muscle skill?
It's the latter, unfortunately. I mean, I'll give you a good example of this. It had been something that was on my goal list for a really long time to move to a 4-day work week. And so last year, starting in 2024, I said, I'm going to do an experiment for the year where I am going to work a 4-day work week. I'm going to see what works about it. I'm going to see what doesn't. I'm not committing to anything beyond a year. I'm just going to see, can I make this work for myself and my business? And I was really, really humbled that it took me about 6 months to properly calibrate the amount of work that I could get done in a 4-day work week. I had been really good, like I had gotten really good at calibrating what I could get done in a 5-day work week. I'd been doing that for 25 years. And it took me realistically about 6 months before regularly every day I was getting done the things that I had said I was going to get done and I wasn't pushing things into the future. And so I think it takes practice and it takes this willingness to accept what is instead of what you want it to be, right? It's like we are always planning for the time we wish we had instead of the
Hmm.
time we actually have. And we got to plan for the time we do have because unfortunately we can't, magic wand and make more.
Right. I mean, but were you working longer days for 4 days a week? Were
I
you
was
trying to be as productive as you were in a 5-day work week, or was the goal to actually work less?
No, the goal was to work a little bit less. So I would say that maybe I've been tracking this year how many hours, and I've been working like 25 to 32 hours a week. So I am working less than a 40-hour or even maybe a little bit more than that work week. And I think in the early stages of my business, I was probably working 45 hours a week or a little bit more. So I'm working a little bit less, but my days are a little bit longer. Like I used to be like, no, I'm done at 4:30, And now I might work till 5, 5:30, or, maybe even 6 sometimes, right? Depending on something. But I'm really trying to contain it. And I never work on evenings or weekends, right? So yeah, it was a calibration because I'm not able to do and I was already pretty efficient, let's just say. So I think sometimes if we don't have efficiencies built in, it might be a little easier to do that. But it was actually quite hard for me, but I
Was
did
it
it.
was and was that surprising?
Yeah, I thought it would be easier. I, like a lot of people, are like, no, like this is what I do for a living. I help people with this stuff. Like I didn't think it would be friction free, but I thought in a month or two, I'll have the hang of this, right? And it took a lot longer than that. And it took me following my own advice that I give to other people, right? It took me being like, no, like this, what you're assigning for yourself isn't realistic. Like you got to cut it down and just continuing to do that a little bit at a time. And so sometimes, with clients, it's like we don't know where to start. We just say, okay, let's cut, you plan and then cut it by 25%. And let's see how that shakes out. Does it work? Does it not? Like what needed to happen? Did we delegate some of that stuff? Did we figure out a system to do it more efficiently? Is some of that stuff just busy work that didn't need to be done in the first place? Like, could we reduce the meetings? Like, there's all these different levers that we can pull to try to make our work fit into the time that we choose to allot to work.
That's really, really interesting. So, it sounds like that was a challenge that you precipitated that for yourself, though, based on a personal driving goal. So,
Yeah.
but when you think about the arc of you growing your business,
Mhm.
you started in 20, did you say 2018, 2019?
2018. Yeah. Yeah.
2018. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I know five, carry the one, like 7 years or something,
Yep.
which is fantastic. But when you think back,
Mhm.
um, like where has the biggest sticky points been? Like, have you fucked up in a way that like really it has stays with you to this day?
I mean, sure. Yes. I would say within the last couple of weeks, I sent out, well, I like fucked up in two ways, right? One, I like just a little one where I'm like, oh, I sent out an email to thousands of people that just didn't contain any of the links that we're supposed to, like just that kind of thing, right? And then there's I am in the middle of transitioning my group coaching program, which used to be a 2 times a year cohort to something that people can enroll in anytime. And I kind of, in moving to an evergreen model, like I hired a coach to help me and I put a bunch of stuff into place. And all of a sudden, like the the messaging or like it was happening too fast. It just like wasn't fully aligned with who I am. And I feel like I started seeing like tons of people being like, no, 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 this is too much too fast, etc. And so like there's times when you're trying to grow when you overstep a little bit and then you're like, ooh, that didn't feel right for me and who I am. And I feel bad about it, of course, because I feel like every single person who gives me the opportunity to like be a part of my world, like I deserve to, or they deserve the best, right, from me. I mean, I can keep going on back into the future with, but those are just the times that are on the tip of my mind.
But
Um, I
do these things stay with you, or are you of the reflective nature that you're like lesson learned and move on, or do they bother you?
I try to be the latter.
Hmm.
And I think that like a lot of time, like when people are like myself, like integrity is really important to me, accountability is really important to me. Um, Being good at what I do is important to me, like that's important to me. These things do stick with me a little bit. And then I have to remind myself, you know what? That's past. Like I can't go back into the past and change anything. The only thing
Hmm.
I can do is change the future. Like the only thing I can do is move things forward or adapt to situations. Like another big time that I screwed up was during the middle of the pandemic. This was actually like a real boon for my business because so many people were struggling with this stuff and needed my help. And all of a sudden, I was in a position where I had like 35 one-on-one coaching clients at once, and I was seeing myself go back into that like I need to help everyone and like I'm gonna burn out. Like this is too much. And so
Mm.
I had to figure out like what's the pivot? Like how can I figure this out so that I don't remain in this bad space for too long, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So how did you? Like, what do you do at that point? Do you start saying no? Do you go to a wait list? Do you?
I went to a wait list and opened the group program. So there were like two things. And so I was like, and I also had like an online course version. So I tried to like be like, okay, there's things that I have that I can help you with right now, even if I can't take you on as an individual one-on-one
Yeah,
coaching client
yeah,
right now. And it didn't feel
right,
great. It doesn't feel great to be like, you need help now and I can help you in 6 months. Like that doesn't feel good. But I can't help anyone if I burn out.
right. That's very true. That's very true. Now, what's next in your business?
So I'm really working on, or I'm just in the early stages of transitioning this group program, coaching program, which is my kind of signature coaching program, takes people through all of the steps to be able to take control of their time into something that I'm running all of the time. And so right now people can enroll anytime, and that is a new big change. And I gotta say, I was like, I was really worried about doing it because I'd been so resistant to doing something like this in the past because I like to take a lot of time off, right? And I thought if I'm delivering something every week, then I need to figure out how do I do that? And
Hmm.
also be able to take time off when I need to take time off. And so I've put, a number of measures in place. And I'm really looking at this year as an experiment too to see, okay, I'm running it all myself. And where could I hire help in the future that would help
Hmm.
me to do this? Or I've put in little things like, I am going to go on vacation this year, and I'm just going to like add a couple weeks to the program for everybody who's in it so that I can go on vacation and they still get what they need.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because you have said, I don't know if you know this, you've said a few times, well, this was an experiment. That was an experiment. At this point, I did it. But isn't that entrepreneurship? Isn't everything, isn't that a constant evolution of the entrepreneurial state?
Yes, yes, totally. And I think that there's also something about experiments, and maybe we as entrepreneurs really love the word experiment because there's less pressure. Like
Mm,
if it's an experiment, my goal is to find out if it works, not resting everything on making it work, right?
right, right, right,
And
right.
it like invites iteration, right? Maybe I screw something up. I'll try something else again and
Just
see if
part
that
of the
works better,
scientific method. Yeah.
right? Yeah. So I believe really strongly in experimentation, not only for myself and my business, but I also think that when we are bringing it back to boundaries a little bit, I think that a lot of times, everybody's resistant to change, right? People are resistant to change, but nobody wants to be the jerk that's unwilling to experiment. And so a lot of times, if we are trying to enact change, if we use the language of experimentation with other people, they're much more open to that. So for
Ooh,
instance,
that sounds like a great brain hack or
yeah,
team hack or management
yes.
hack. Yeah.
Yes. And so it can come in little ways like, oh, there's this team meeting that happens every day at 8:30 and like that's when I'm taking my kids to school or whatever, but I don't feel like I can say anything about it because I'm just one person and there are 10 people in this meeting. But you could say, "Hey, I'm wondering if folks would be willing to experiment with doing this meeting at 10 a.m. instead of 8:30. Could we try that for a couple weeks and just see if it works any better?" Most people will say yes to that.
Yeah. That's a great tip. And I think that's a great place to do our little transition.
Okay.
Um, to my our rapid fire section, which is completely unrelated to everything we've talked about today, but I think is a fun social experiment. Ha, see, I got the word
Ah.
in. You ready, Alexis?
Yep, I'm ready.
Awesome. What is your favorite social media?
TikTok. It's the only one that I've ever really loved. And I will say I don't love, I mean, I do have social media for my business. TikTok is the only one I've ever like really loved personally just as a user because it understands me so well and just keeps popping me ceramics videos and
I know it's like it reads your brain.
reads your brain.
It's
It's
so good. Yeah.
so dangerous. I've had to set boundaries about it for myself.
Yes, yes. I'm a big fan of TikTok and especially the sort of funny cat video. I mean, it sounds like cliche, but it is. I enjoy animal videos
Yeah.
with humor. Okay, next question. Taylor Swift, yay, nay, or don't care?
I don't care. She's fine. Like some of her songs are catchy. I can't listen. I tried to listen to an entire album. I couldn't make it through, but she does have a few great songs.
Okay. Is there a book you always recommend, or conversely, a book you would never recommend?
Okay, the book that I always recommend, or frequently recommend, one of my favorite books around, well, I'll do two books. One is a personal, like just fun thing, and then the other one is like business related. So I love this book called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Berkman.
Ooh,
And it's really just about the idea that, look, we have 4,000 weeks about in our lifetimes, and we cannot do all of the things. Like in some ways, I'm a little mad I didn't write this book first because it aligns so much with my philosophy around things, but I
mm-hmm.
found it to be really helpful for a lot of folks who might be type A and kind of reducing that shame cycle around feeling like you have to do more, better, faster all of the time. Because it helps ground you in the fact that, like, you know what, you can't. I'm not going to read the 450 books that are on my to read list because the list is only going to get longer. I can't
Right.
do all the things, right? I love that book. And then my favorite, like, just novel that I love is a book I've loved since I was 16 called Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. And it is just a book about kind of loss and this one woman's experience and love, and it's short and nothing in the way of many Japanese books, like nothing really happens during it, but it's just like so beautiful to read, you know?
Like poetry then. Yeah.
Yeah.
And where do you want to go on your next vacation?
Um, well, my next vacation is planned, and we're doing Morocco, Tunisia, and the Canary Islands, and I
Oh
have
my
never
goodness.
been to any of those places, so we're going this summer, and I'm super excited about it.
That sounds very unique and interesting. So, and you travel with your family?
Yeah, yeah. Although I will say my 16-year-old is like not into traveling with us. He's like, "Can I not go?" And I'm like, "You what? Like what privileged ridiculousness is this?" You know?
Who raised you?
Yes, who raised you?
That's really exciting. Well, Alexis, we will link in our show notes to the books you mentioned, as well as your LinkedIn and your business website. It has been such a pleasure talking with you, and I have all these like little nuggets of both inspiration, some permission, which I think we all need an outside source giving us permission to maybe let up on ourselves a little bit. I appreciate you being here with our sharing your wisdom with the M Word listeners.
Well, thanks so much. It was really a pleasure.